So guys, welcome to this week's Mastermind. Really excited to have none other than the fabulous, the one, the only, Madeline Kennedy. So Maddie has been a great friend, a mentor to so many people, and has really supported within the Marshall White business the growth and development of not just her and her direct team with James Redfern, but also from a broader point of view, supporting great leaders going to that next stage. So, Maddie, great to have you here this morning. Hang on. I'm going to unmute you.
Thanks, Mike. Good to be here.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, we've used this technology for only about 12 weeks. You'd think I'd kind of have nailed it by now, but anyway.
It is all good, all good. So guys, today with Maddie, thought it'd be really great to chat a little bit about the strategy and the framework that her and James have created in terms of the super team that you guys are run with, Maddie. Then talk a little bit about what you guys have put in place over the time frame that we've been in, some level of lockdown and so on. And then coming out of that, the point to around how are you building your pipeline? Have you changed your listing appointment in any particular way to be able to capitalize on this? And sort of, back to that conversation we've had a couple of weeks ago, which is if confidence is missing, people won't act. And so, how are we actually putting more confidence into the mix? So great to have you here. I'm going to be looking at chat as we go through. So if you've got a question for Maddie, or you'd like her to go into some more detail around a point, then please drop that in, so I'll be able to go through and make it happen. So Maddie, do you want to talk a little bit about the structure of your team? And I think, guys, this is important to note because you can run as a solo agent, but you'll know as a fundamental belief of mine that I believe there's going to be more business done by teams in the future, and it's allowing us to play to strengths and so on. So.
Yeah,
Maddie.
Absolutely, Mike. So just by way of team structure and background, James and I have been working together now for, I think about 10 years, feels like forever. So I was within another team at Marshall White when James and I decided to hook up and kind of, do the husband-wife type team. And it worked for us in terms of our different skill set and, different personality types and things like that. So we just felt that it would be a good balance. I think that's always really important when you're looking to set up, the structure within your team and who you're teaming up with. So we have, within our team, we've got 2 support agents. So David, who's been with us now for close to, I think, 7 or 8 years, he's been with us. So he started as a more junior agent, and he was very much a support agent, helping us manage campaigns, doing a lot of the buyer work. He's now got to the point where he generates enough of his own listings that he doesn't really have time for management, which from our point of view and his point of view means that he's succeeded and we've succeeded in kind of bringing him up to that level so that he's got enough of his own income and listings generated. We recently were lucky enough to secure a fabulous lady by the name of Abby Innes, who was working with one of our competitors, and we managed to attract her across due to culture and branding and that sort of thing within Marshall White. So she'd had about 4 years experience elsewhere in the top end of the market. She's come across to us, and Abby she's just has a lot of intuition. She's not so much process driven, but she's very intuitive. You can put her in front of pretty much any client and know that she's going to click, which I think is an amazing kind of talent and skill to have on the team. And just a fabulous person, just with a heart of gold. So she's been an amazing addition to the team. She joined us back in March, and I felt a bit sorry for her because within a week of her joining, we're all gone out of the office and we're in ISO. But she's fine. She's very self managed and that type of thing. So she felt that she was okay and she didn't need to be micromanaged. So and then we've got 3 amazing ladies, Annetta, Claire and Paulina. Annetta and Claire have been with us for a long time. Annetta's been with us for about 10 years. She's now our business manager, so she basically runs the team. We don't want to run the team, we just list and sell. Annetta runs the team. And we've given her that mandate, and she absolutely, she loves it. She loves the responsibility that she has. Claire and Paulina are in a job share role where they do all of the marketing, and they work the equivalent of probably 1.5 person. So they're both on a part-time basis sharing, and that works beautifully. I was a little skeptical at the start as to how that would work and how things wouldn't fall through the cracks. But again, we haven't micromanaged them. We've let them sort that all out themselves, and it works beautifully. So that we've never had a client complain, say that something was missed or that they don't know who they're supposed to be talking to. So the girls have done well. So that's our team, James and I,
great.
and Dave and the three ladies.
Yeah, great. And I think, Maddie, one of the things that was really neat is the strategy session that yourself and James and I had the other day. Is you added Annetta into that, and I think that's a really smart move, as opposed to, so she's feeling really that level of responsibility about growing the team, developing the team, and looking for smarter ways to move things forward. So you've actually created a really nice shift there. It's not just you guys looking for better ways; she's actually looking for better ways too. And we did cover in that conversation that 40% of lead generation is an admin-based function, which I think was a real eye-opener for her to say, wow, I could be adding so much more value in the generation side of the business coming through.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. Because I think a lot of agents get bogged down in that, and they think, oh my gosh, okay, I've just sold this property. Now I'm going to spend the next 3 hours running around doing some, reverse marketing or whatever it might be that you're doing. That shouldn't be done by the agent. So that's where we've got systems in place where Annetta will say to us, okay, what do you want to do with that sale? And a whole series of things will now happen, more as a result of the catch up that we have with you, Mike, because you've got a whole list of things that should happen. We were doing certain things, but now we've just supercharged that to make sure that all of those things happen and the girls basically own it and run it. And often I'll say to Annette, oh, that was your listing. You got that because you did those letters and you made that happen. And, she loves that. I've always been a big believer, and if you want somebody to be better, or if you want them to perform better, treat them better and give them some kudos. Whenever we make a sale, I never ever say it was my sale. I always say Abby did an amazing job putting that deal together. She had 6 offers. She worked on the campaign. The vendors are wrapped. Most of us have been in it long enough. We don't need to do that. We don't need that. Pat on the back. I just love the opportunity whenever I get it to basically give the team the credit for something that's happened.
And Maddie, this is something that we cover now at in the Super Teams program, which may be run sometime in the future. But one of the things I talk about is the window and the mirror. And the window is looking out the window when you're wanting to acknowledge. So something great's happened. Look out the window. Who can I acknowledge for this? Who can I reward for this? Something doesn't go well. I need to look in the mirror. So how do I look in the mirror and say, how could I have done better? How could I have set this up in that particular way? This is the opposite of the old style of leadership. The old style of leadership would be, I look in the mirror when something great happens. Look at me, look at me, look at me. And if something that doesn't happen so great, let me look out the window and see what's the issue. Who can I blame for this? So it's actually a big shift that you guys have evolved from a leadership point of view within the team. Now,
fantastic.
We're talking about team structure at the moment. Let's now shift that to some things that you have put in place through this time that even you might take forward with you around how you guys have been operating and so on.
Yeah, sure. So when it all happened, everyone was in the same boat. There was a lot of shock. There was a lot of, people were scared. We were all scared. We didn't know what the future held. But I think we managed to get through that. We made some changes within the team in terms of responsibilities. And then we said to the girls, given that there's not going to be a lot of marketing tasks to complete, because we'd moved to a lot of off-market properties sales, we need to utilize your skill set in actually driving the sales. So no longer are you just an admin team. You are now the sales support team. So, and again, it comes back to just the checklists, which we're pretty big on. We've got a checklist for pretty much everything. So basically we asked the girls to, when something was listed, when a property was listed, probably off market, it was their job to go and find the buyers. So they had to print out the lists for us. They had to say, okay, let's get this other property that we sold recently, and I'll go and speak to Nick Brooks, who sold it, who was one of our other team members. And so they were doing a lot of the behind the scenes stuff because their time wasn't taken up in marketing and proofing and booking ads and all of those sorts of things. So they actually were in the trenches with us, which I think was really amazing from their point of view. They sort of have now got a better understanding, I think, as to, you know, what it's like out there and what it's like dealing with buyers. So they weren't dealing with buyers, they weren't taking buyers through properties, but they were doing the support activity to get buyers to properties. So they just stepped up.
So, Maddie, what's really neat about this is that one of my challenges always within a super team is that the admin team are waiting for you to initiate. So what you've done is you flip that around and say, no, it's your responsibility. So this is actually changing the responsibility to say, actually, I'm actually going to uncover and discover where are the buyers coming from. Now, they're not doing the buyer work as such, but they're doing the investigative journalism to be able to get to a short list or a list around those. Fantastic, great.
Yeah, so that's one thing, and I think hopefully that's something that we can continue on with. I'd like that to be the case, and I think they quite enjoy that part of it as well, actually being involved in a sale. And one of the other things that I made a decision back then was that I didn't want to regret not doing more during this time. So you can either sit back and say, well, this is a strange time. There's so much uncertainty that I think I'm just going to put the handbrake on and kind of do nothing for the next couple of months. And possibly some people have done that, and perhaps not being so disciplined in working remotely and getting distracted, you know, by not being in the office and that sort of thing. But I didn't want to sit back at the end of the time, whenever the end of the time this COVID is, and say and have any regrets that I didn't do enough. So and that's in all aspects of life. So I wanted to make sure I took the opportunity to spend more time with the children. So Harry and Poppy, who are only 2 and 4. So the ability to see them more whilst working remotely has been fabulous. So I've just got myself set up in a little studio at the back of our house, so I can see them out in the garden playing. They're on the trampoline, they're mucking around. We're obviously very lucky to have an au pair who lives with us, so she's looking after them from, you know, the stuff that they need to do and keeping them away from the office door. But I can still see them during the day, which is great. We can have lunch together and we can go on a walk down to the beach together, or we can go to the park. So I think the balance has been really nice in being able to spend more time with the children and not be not being in the office sort of 10 hours a day, not seeing them. So that's going to continue. That's definitely something that we're going to take with us. And I also basically just knuckled down on client nurture. So, early on in the piece, when we perhaps only had a couple of listings on the go, my focus wasn't so much the next deal. Obviously, we wanted to get properties sold, but things were taking a little bit longer. But I wanted to make sure I utilised this time and invested back in client nurture. And that's playing the long game. That's not, are you ready to sell today? Because they weren't. That wasn't even an appropriate question. It was just checking in with people. And over the last 4 years, I did feel that I had neglected my client base a little bit after having, being on a little bit of, baby leave and that sort of thing. A lot of the client nurture kind of dropped away because I was doing more reactive, more now stuff. So this has been a fantastic opportunity just to get back into the client nurture and reconnect with clients who I perhaps haven't spoken to for a year or two. Mm-hmm. And they're great calls to make, especially at the moment. Everyone's pretty much happy to chat to you, except if they were doing homeschooling where they weren't happy to chat, they were dying. But it's been really nice just reconnecting with people on a human level. And inevitably the topic comes up, how are you guys going? How's the market? What's happening? So you didn't even have to bring that up because inevitably the conversation got to that, and then you'd fill them in and give them an update. They were always surprised to hear that we, as a company, we'd sold 78 properties in April, and one lady said to me, I can't believe you've even sold one. But, I just explained to her there are people that need to buy and people that need to sell. So, the wheels keep turning, and we're fortunate that we were able to continue to help people. So, so, telling the story and telling stories about how we sold properties. And it may not even have been my property, but it was someone within the team at Marshall White who had a great story and a great case study that we can share with the broader sort of client base and the community. Spread the word.
Guys, can I just sort of jump in and hopefully you're picking this up, but could you be listening at two levels with this? What's the strategy that Madeline put in place, and what's some of the dialogue there? So, we sold this many properties. It was really fortunate we were able to help these people through this time buy and sell. So it wasn't like coming from a brag point of view. It was coming like we're really fortunate with the opportunity to be able to help people sell. And, Madeline, for you and for James, that's part of your energy there's a bit of humility in there that people at this point in time see beautifully. If we go too much like, well, I don't know what you're talking about. We're selling property. Everything's great. It's like, well, actually, no, there's a lot of people out there that are hurting, that are twists and turns. So to have that level of respect in there, so just make sure you're listening to the dialogue and what's behind this, guys? What's behind Madeline's dialogue, as well as just what is actually the strategy on top of it.
I think,
great,
Mike, just on that, I think anyone, and there were people who went through a bragging stage, and that's okay. Maybe that they just needed an adjustment. So, we sold X million dollars. And social media, it was all over social media during April. So maybe it was an overcompensating strategy. But I think I don't think the market likes it. I think the market basically says, well, my husband's lost his job, and I personally think that there's going to be a lot more pain to come. I think we're just in a holding pattern at the moment. So people don't want to hear that. People, so we were still able to get the message across, but as you said, just from a respectful, position rather than bragging. And I often say to clients, when we're talking about the market, especially people who are close to making a decision, perhaps about selling, you give them an update as to how the market is. Everyone's fairly aware of what's going on. And I often say any agent who tells you that it's other than that, is possibly, not, telling a fib or whatever the dialogue might be. A client said to me the other day that another agent who they'd been talking to said that their house hadn't been affected by Corona. And all properties have been affected. Everything has been affected. But that client actually started to question that agent's integrity by making that comment. So I think we will be punished later on by the community and by the people around us if we don't handle this properly.
Yeah.
As people.
It's a really great way. So Maddie, 2 points that if we can sort of move on to the, how you're generating business. So clearly you upgraded client nurture, sort of took that to another level. Where are your listings coming from now? And what do you think is helping you build your pipeline at the moment?
So miraculously, some of the listings have come from client nurture. I don't get it.
Who would have thought?
And often it's I often say to different team members, I'm a big believer in manifesting, right? So if you make enough calls and you're saying the right thing, and your dialogue doesn't have to be perfect. It's evolving as we get more experience. So not as a young agent, if you might feel like your dialogue's a little bit clunky or, oops, I can't believe I just said that or whatever. But as long as it's improving, it's okay. But if you're making enough calls and enough connections and enough conversations and making enough effort with enough people, then something will happen. And often I find that it doesn't even come from the calls that you're making. It comes from left field. It's like a gift that you get because you made 500 calls in May or whatever it was, or in April. You'll be given a gift. There's no doubt. You can't do all those calls and not get a gift, either from the calls that you're making or from somebody somewhere else, either a referral or something that comes from left field or something that just drops in your lap. So I'm a big believer in manifesting because I think for a lot of people, they sort of think, gosh, I'm making all these calls, and like I made 50 yesterday, I didn't get anything, so I'm going to give up, because the call thing, that's not working for me. But if you just keep doing it, you know, the other agents are going to give up after they've made their 20 or whatever it is and they didn't get anything. But if you do it consistently and you do it well and you say the right things and you ask the right questions, then listings will come of that.
So Maddie, can I just jump in on this? How many properties do you want to sell per year? I mean, what are you wanting to list per year?
50.
Yeah, 50. Now, guys, this is such an important concept to get. So Maddie just talked about 500 calls, and whether it was 500 or not, Maddie's not the point. But the vast majority of people you're going to call are not going to sell, right? So this is a really important point. So if you're only looking for ones that sell, you're almost playing listing lotto, as opposed to if you shift it and say, no, I'm a service legend. I'm going to give people quality information about what's happening in the marketplace to inform them rather than overwhelm them what's happening. I'm going to bring them closer to me from an advice point of view. And, you know, I know you guys are great believers in we don't know who they know. So I better give great service now, because this person might have a coffee catch up, or be chatting with, or best mates with, or dropping the kids off to school or something like that with someone. But out of the 50, you're looking for a very small percentage to say yes. The most important thing, I think, in this process, and you're a great operator with this way, how do I deliver value on this call? And I know John Cunningham last week talked about care calls and value calls. We've shifted from care calls. There might still be some care calls to do, but we're now actually moving into value calls and making sure there's value in there, in the conversation as to what we're doing. Yeah, so it's just
absolutely.
an observation.
Yeah, and I think, you know, when the market is confused, I think it's like you're saying, Mike, a confused mind stalls. Well, a confused market also stalls, and a lot of people will sit on the fence and take a wait and see approach. So if we're selling properties off market, we need to get them out there and tell people that we're actually, you know, we're putting sold stickers up, and tell them the story about how that sale came about. So again, it's not bragging, but it's just being informative, and it's helping the market to see that things are happening. The wheels are turning. And, you know, maybe we could sell now, you know, maybe it's not as bad as it was 6 weeks ago. So perhaps we should ring the agent and talk to them about selling. So the other thing we do is when a listing, I can't remember what you actually call it, Mike, but when the team lists a property, whether it's our team or the broader Marshall White team, Annetta will then I'll choose the properties that I want her to do this little exercise for. She'll do a search of my database, who lives within the radius of that new listing, and then they'll get an email link about that property. So, hi Michael, we just thought you'd be interested to hear that we've just listed 7 Royal Crescent, Armidale. You know, pop in if you get a chance, open for inspection Saturday 10 to 10:30, whatever it might be. You know, and I look forward to checking in with the result. So those emails go out, and then in, you know, 3, 4, 5 weeks time, the sold email goes out, so people can see that things are happening and properties are being listed and properties are being sold. So because, you know, they're not necessarily seeing on the domain, you know, email that they get on a Saturday night about what's sold at auction that day. They need to be to actually, you know, be told and be informed. Yeah.
So Maddie, can we just come back to, you've got someone who said, oh, I think it's better I sell later than sell now. So
yep,
you've had some kind of conversation that they have an intention to sell, but they're not sure when.
Not sure when.
It's easy for them to delay it. What conversation are you having? And, you know, I'm happy to even role play this. So you know, I'll be the vendor thinking of sitting on the fence.
Yeah.
What would you typically pop into the conversation there?
Well, ideally, I'd like to have this conversation face-to-face rather than over the phone. I think it has a lot more impact if you're actually sitting with them or standing with them in their living room talking about it. You know, I mean, and this is my absolute opinion, but I think the second half of the year is going to be fairly tough. Not from our point of view necessarily, because I think there'll be more volume. So I think from an agent's point of view, it's going to be it's probably, it's going to be better, but we're going to have to get a lot better at, with our dialogue and around, giving people the opportunity to sell. But I think given what's happening in the economy, I can't see it being anything other than a fairly tough market for the next 12 to 18 months.
From a seller's point of view.
From a seller's point of view, yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously, we don't have that conversation with buyers because then they'll just sit on the fence and wait for the stock to come. That's a different conversation. So depending what people are doing, I mean, when somebody says to me, "How is it? How's the market?" Well, you've got to find out what they're doing before you answer that question. I think that's one thing I've learned from you, Mike. Are they buying? Are they selling? And the dialogue obviously is tweaked according to what their motivation and what they're doing. So if there is a desire to do something, Mike, and it doesn't put too much pressure on you now, I would actually, if I were you, encourage you to get onto the market sooner rather than later. And you've always mentioned that there are a few things that you want to do to the home, and certainly we can help with that with Megan, our stylist, and she's got a team of tradespeople that can help. But I think a lot of clients that we're talking to at the moment are talking about selling in spring. And although it's lovely when everyone's garden is blooming, what that means is that if everyone's thinking about doing that, we anticipate there'll be a fair bit of volume on in September, October, November. As a seller, if I were you, I would want to be sold prior to that. And given that you're going to want to be buying after you've sold, I would love to be a buyer in that market. So having sold, knowing what you've got in your pocket, and be a buyer when the volume returns. At the moment, the thing that's holding up prices is the lack of stock. So we've got frustrated buyers, not a lot of property out there at the moment, not a lot coming on in terms of the pipeline, and we can kind of see out to the next 6 weeks with the people that we're talking to. So I would just encourage you to give some thought to perhaps bringing your plans forward and selling in the next couple of months rather than waiting for that spring market, which is when I think you'd be great to be a buyer. So
guys, that is unbelievably great dialogue, Maddie. And I love the fact that you said, if it doesn't put too much pressure on you, I'd love you to consider bringing this decision forward. And here's the reason why. And then you went into this beautiful boom, 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 boom. You used, because in your language and so on. So now I've got a rationale that is...
You're planting a seed. It's just planting a seed.
Absolutely.
And then the discussion's going to be happening at home, tonight with husband or partner or wife or whatever it might be. And based on what the media are saying, it's very hard to argue with that. Like the media are forecasting, Commonwealth Bank, what are they saying, 30% or something. So there is that fear from a potential seller's point of view of how bad is it going to get. So you either put your plans on hold for the next 3 years and just just enjoy the home. But if the plan is to do something in the next 12 months, then I'd encourage you to consider it sooner rather than later.
Yeah, it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant now dialogue to bring listings forward. And Maddie, one of the strengths of Marshall White as a business is auctioning property. You've got that strength. You're bringing a lot into a phase 1, phase 2. Is that correct? Or going with an off market to start with at the moment?
Yeah. So depending on their circumstances, if we've got time for off market, then that's a nice little kind of entree into the process. If they want to get on with it because they bought a house last week, then we may not have time for that. But there's still an opportunity to take buyers through during the week of photos and that type of thing. But to make people feel comfortable, we've been encouraged to get a certain number of auctions booked in for June, July. In my heart of hearts, I'm not comfortable pushing that at the moment because I don't see the strength and the depth in the market to all of a sudden go from no auctions to auction, because I think that could actually do more harm than good if we get to June, July and, things don't sell at auction. And I'm not suggesting they won't sell at auction, but I think you have to be fairly careful with the properties that you choose to take to auction. So if it's a property that you anticipate will have multiple parties bidding and that you feel that the vendors are realistic in their pricing and it ticks the boxes from all other points of view in terms of presentation and that type of thing, then yes, I think that's well worth considering. We had an expressions of interest close last week on a single fronted home and we had six or seven expressions of interest. Now, in hindsight, would we have auctioned that? Well, we couldn't back then anyway. That's why it was booked for an EOI. Possibly we could have flipped it to become an auction. So that's always the option, is in week 3, you can flip it. And you can say, okay, well, we've got 6 or 7 potential buyers, Mr. and Mrs. Vendor. So I think it's very much taking a consultative approach, not just bang, we're going to take you home to auction, because I think there would be a lot of resistance to that, and that's not going to help. I just don't think that's the right advice. And I always want to give the right advice to clients, not, to get another auction up on the board. So I think, and expressions of interest, I think, is a nice, safe way of approaching it initially, with the option to switch it to an auction, subject to who the buyers are, the depth of interest, and whether we think that there's going to be a gap between the stronger buyer and the next. It's very hard to flip an auction back to EOI. Like, that would look very sus in the market, but it's very normal to change an EOI to an auction, subject to the, the ingredients that you have in the campaign.
Yeah. So a couple of things here. You've heard from me, guys, the team that plays to the conditions best wins. So this is a really good example, Maddie, where you're playing to the conditions. So what are the conditions that exist right now? By the way, if we had this conversation in 6 weeks' time, it might be a totally different strategy, because the market's actually moved, which is the first point. So playing to the conditions, guys, play the conditions. What are the conditions? What's the dialogue with this? The other 2 words, and you haven't used these words, Maddie, but you're demonstrating them brilliantly, is market intel. So, and by the way, I love you utilizing that term. I'd like to share with you some market intel, or can we just have a look at the market dynamics we're seeing at the moment? I'd like to share a bit of intel with you around some of the market dynamics that exist at the moment. So just a nice little elevation of your, the way that you're packaging this. Everyone loves intel. They want to understand what the market dynamics are, and you happen to be the person who's going to actually deliver that or give me the best insights around it. So brilliant. At the listing appointment itself, have you either taken anything out? Have you added anything at this particular point in time?
I've taken out a lot of gumph and I pre-frame that with vendors, like that. There's no gumph. I'm just coming here with information. And, I know sometimes you have to have gumph if they're a kind of a marketing type person where, gumph is their life. And when I say that, I'm talking about the big chunky pre-list kit, the big chunky submission, which is all templated. I can't stand them, because I think that's just, you drop their name in, then you drop that in, then you drop that in, and it's not personalized. Like, I just don't like those, but you have to pick your mark. Some people like them, and some people use them all the time. I think James uses them all the time. I can't remember the last time I used one. But I would rather have all of the information at hand, and everything's now delivered on my iPad. So because we weren't going into the office to get, folders full of comparable sales and market share graphs and things like that. So it's all on the iPad now, which has been great. And obviously you just email it to the client while you're sitting with them anyway. I'll just send this to you so that you can have a little look at it tonight. So comparable sales, we go through all of those on the iPad. So that's probably changed a little bit, just the way we present the information. We've now moved to all electronic authorities now as well. So paper authorities at Marshall White have now finished. We had their funeral last week, so that as of the 1st of June, we cannot present. What's that? Rest in peace paper authorities. They're not allowed in the office anymore. We can't process them.
Is that so James in the background wanting to get in on the act? Yeah,
he's just delivered me my coffee, and yeah.
Oh, gold star, James.
There he is. So yeah, we do the electronic authorities, which are fabulous. As we know, they get basically just sent off to all the parties who need to have them. So the admin girls get theirs, and the vendor gets theirs, and the solicitor gets theirs. It's, cuts out so many hours of paperwork. And I've probably been a little more casual with clients, and they've actually. I think people actually like it. Now, I'm not suggesting throw away your suits and don't look professional ever again. I'm not suggesting that, but I did get called into appraisal a couple of weeks ago, and I wasn't prepared. I didn't have my work clothes on because I was working remotely that day. But the lady was only going to be in Melbourne that day. She was driving from Sorrento. And I said, look, I can jump in the car. I'm in Shoreham at the moment, but I can jump in the car and I'll come and see you on the basis that you're okay that I'm not in my suit. And she said, oh, God, I'd prefer that. So, you know, I think there's a bit of a shift away from that very corporate, which can be quite intimidating, I think, for some clients who don't want to see that. So I've actually had a few people who said, oh, yeah, just casuals is fine. So I'm not sure how long we can sustain that for. I hope that it changes for good.
But Maddie, I think the point that everyone wants to hear in that is you pre-framed it. It wasn't.
Oh, if you turning up
in my Lorna Jane outfit and saying, "Hey, I'm Sporty Spice," and then going like, "Okay, yeah. Sporty Spice has arrived." You've let them know that, "Hey, I'm in my casuals" before you actually arrive.
Yeah,
this is super important.
Definitely, good, yeah. Very good point, yeah. Mike. So definitely not suggesting that everyone goes out and wears their Lorna Janes or their listing appointments, but I think a slightly more casual approach is okay. You know, like smart casual rather than you know the full suit. But anyway, some people will disagree with me on that, so that's okay. I think you have to pick your mark. But I think it's more of a human approach to the actual appointment, making a connection with people. I don't know what it is. It's obviously as a result of Corona, but people seem to be craving more human connection. And I think it's an ideal opportunity as agents for us to actually, do that. I think that anyone who can't do that is probably very disadvantaged now. And I'm hoping that that's something that's going to last forever. So someone who's very process driven and lacks the ability to, you know, build rapport with people, or doesn't listen to what the client's needs are, is probably going to be at a disadvantage from here on. That's just my observation of how people seem to be now. People are just craving connection and knowing that somebody cares and is interested in them and how they're doing.
Maddie, this is a super, super important point. A number of years ago, I had a coaching session with an agent in Melbourne, not at Marshall White, just in case you're wondering. And the principal asked me to sit down with his agent because couldn't quite work out why he wasn't getting the kind of success that he potentially could. He'd been in the market long enough, had great dialogue and so on. I sat down and said, okay, we'll just run through what you do at a listing appointment. So, you know, how do you set up your listing appointment? So we're chatting like this. And then he went, one of the things I do at the listing appointment is da, 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 da. And then he finished it and he went back. And then I asked him the next thing, okay, how do you do pricing? Oh, this is pricing. And I said, I've worked it out, right? You're not bringing you to the listing appointment. You bring this fake person who is, you know, dialogued up to the gazooga, you know, great scripts, great dialogue, but you're not being human. You're being robotic with it, as opposed to what's your intention here? What's your connection? And that human connection, I think, is bigger than it's ever been.
Yeah.
Around that. Yeah. Hey, Maddie, we're all close to out of time in terms of today. Guys, if you enjoyed this, quickly share as we go through the key things that that really have resonated in the chat that you've enjoyed the most. And while we're doing that, Maddie, what would be your three biggest tips for this next phase of how you're operating and what you're doing, and any tips you'd like to share with the guys in the network?
I think we have to be super responsive at the moment. I think when people make it in this market and this environment, when people make a decision to get on and sell, they're doing it like tomorrow. So I think we have to be listening, qualifying even better than we ever have, and to respond really, really quickly to what they need. So getting information to them, getting the appointment set up, and getting things happening, and ASAP. Because if the market is going to be tougher in terms of prices softening and more volume on the market towards this, September or whatever it might be, people are may want to get on sooner than that, and they might want to beat that, that part of the market. So we have to be super responsive. Look, I just think we just have to be asking the right questions during our phone, our nurture calls and qualifying people. And one thing that Dan Wheeler is brilliant at, and he's had some great success at it, is suppose I would you. So if I had a buyer, could I bring them through your home type question. Now, we're not asking that on every single phone call. We should be asking it a lot more, but he's had some amazing success. So in this market where vendors don't necessarily have the confidence to sell, even though they may have a desire to sell, for an agent to say, if I had a buyer, could I actually bring them through? That's very tempting, rather than the old process of getting photos taken, getting the styling done, getting online, booking the auction, all that sort of thing. So it's a question that's working really well. The other thing that's worked really well for James and I in the past 6 weeks or 8 weeks, whatever it's been, is PCA. So because of the lack of properties on the market, often we will say to potential buyers, drive around, choose some streets you like, choose some houses, and I will do that, and I'll send them a letter, or I'll knock on their door, whatever it might be. And the buyer will often say, oh my gosh, would you really? Was that what you do? Yeah, absolutely. So, and sometimes we just choose houses that we think would suit a client if they haven't given us the list. I probably get, I think about, Annetta sends about 100 of those letters out for us each per week. And for the last 6 weeks or so, on average, I've had 2 phone calls a week. So that's not bad. And even if they're not selling right now, they're going straight into pipeline. So PCA has served us really well.
PCA, property centric prospecting, guys, or property. Yes.
Yes. Property centric activity. Yeah.
Let's get it right. Yeah.
Yep. So that's working really well. So, with the lack of property on the market, and you've got your 10 red hot buyers, either go and choose some properties and put a letter in the letterbox. And we changed our letter as well to be COVID sensitive. So completely different to the letter that we used to send out, which I think was a really nice touch. So maybe that's why I'm getting a better response from it. But about 2 a week, 2 phone calls a week saying, got your letter. Yes, we are actually thinking of doing something. Can we chat?
Maddie, would you mind sharing that as one of Marshall White's innovations for the network?
Happy to.
The leaders know we're actually going through innovations this particular month. We typically do it at Principal Advance, and we'll get that letter onto the knowledge base, guys. And once again, I love R&D. The whole ability of research and development, and you might need to change it for your marketplace, but if it's working for James and Maddie, there's a very good chance that it'll work for you as well. So here's a couple of things that are coming through. Georgie Bates says, good on you, Mads, enjoying the balance, well deserved. Sandy talked about luck comes from those who put in the work, getting on the iPad to show graphs and comps, etc. Love that. From Georgie, Duncan Hill, make the calls and get a gift. I love that, Duncan, I agree. Share with you some market dynamics and market intel, EOI, and a potential change to an option, so the expression of interest. Craig, sell now and be a buyer in September, October. I think that's a great frame to introduce Craig. Deb Montgomery, excellent session. Sorry I have to lie. Okay, great. Maddie is so real, very relatable and a refreshing face to see in the industry. Maddie, that's a great compliment from Deb.
Deb.
EIA sounds so much better. All the others, best offer by you, whatever brand we put together. Hang on. Or whatever brand we put to the process. Thanks, Maddie. Okay, cool. Fantastic session. Great. A confused market stalls. Good to being an advisor and the market dynamics. Thanks, Maddie and Michael. And thank you, Maddie and Michael. Okay, awesome. So Maddie, great session. And just awesome energy and effort that you're putting in. I think it's fair to say, guys, that this has been just a great kind of alignment along those lines. My ultimate goal out of these sessions is that you have a discussion with your team. Georgie, I see you there. That might be with your team directly or the broader team at Cunningham's, and you get together and say, okay, let's have a look at this and how do we actually move this forward? What is the 1, 2, 3 things that we can take on board coming out of this that will actually make the biggest difference possible? So Maddie, thank you so much. Guys, we won't do the breakout rooms today. We'll let you get going with a productive day. But Maddie, I just wanted to acknowledge you and James, the energy you're putting into the business. We wish you well as we head into the next Aussie financial year from here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Have a good day, everyone.
Pleasure.